UFC 314 is less than a month away, and in that event, we have Patricio Pitbull finally landing in the UFC's featherweight division to take on Yair Rodriguez, who is in the top 5 of the division. And Patricio Pitbull is getting this top 5 ranking opportunity on his debut straight up for good reason, being one of the most decorated fighters in MMA history outside of the UFC, which I talk all about his career successes, the statistics, and his striking, his wrestling, his grappling ability, doing an in-depth analysis in his fighter spotlight video, which I released last week, which I highly recommend that you check that out. It gives much more insight into who Patricio Pitbull is and answers why his UFC debut is such a hot topic in the MMA space. But in this video, we are going to be doing a tier list to pin Patricio Pitbull up against every single one of the fighters in the top 15 of the featherweight division, as you can see at the bottom of the screen. Now, if you haven't already seen one of these tier lists before, the Fighter Spotlight tier list videos, basically with the tier list, as you can see, green, good, red, bad. So the best matchups for Patricio Pitbull are going to be at the top, and it's going to go down and down and down until there might be someone in that nightmare matchup who I believe he does not want to go up against. But then on the other side, if it is his best matchup, then I definitely think that he is going to win that matchup. So we're going to start at 15th with Edson Barboza, and then we're going to go through to Alexander Volkanovski, and I'm going to throw in Max Holloway and Ilia Topuria in there as a bonus for you guys, even though they're not actually in the division anymore. But anyway, let's start. So Edson Barboza. Edson Barboza, we know he's a great dynamic striker, but he isn't the greatest on the back foot, especially when he is getting pressured. And to give you a little bit of a spiel about Patricio Pitbull to go off, which I definitely recommend the Fighter Spotlight video before this. It gives you everything that you need to know to go into this video. But to give a little bit of a breakdown, Patricio Pitbull has a lot of power. He has good counter striking, is aggressive, good with forward pressure as well. He's got a low output, but the power just equalizes it. And then his grappling on the ground itself, very, very dynamic grappler. Has got submissions from pretty much anywhere. He can get choke-based, he can get limb-based, whether it's arm, whether it's leg-based submissions. He is very dangerous. And then on the wrestling side of things, he isn't the greatest wrestler, but he does have good takedown defense because of his explosivity within his ability to sprawl. So that's realistically a bit of a breakdown of what Patricio Pitbull is and what he offers going in to fight the top 15 in featherweight. So looking at Edson Barboza, as I said, great dynamic striker, but isn't the greatest on the back foot, with which Patricio Pitbull is going to be able to pressure him and apply that very well. And Edson on that back foot, he can get suffocated pretty well. But if Edson is able to be on the front foot, then he is in good luck there. He's stylistically is in favor because he does have very dynamic striking, and Patricio Pitbull doesn't have the greatest head movement, stays on the center line a lot, and that's where he can get caught out. If you watch him versus Sergio Pettis, got caught out. Now, Edson Barboza, the guy is on the older side. He's not as explosive as he used to be, but he still is decent. Like, he's still got the explosivity there, but I think compared to what Patricio Pitbull has been offering in comparison to Edson Barboza in this time frame, I'm going to have to put it in slight favor. I think he would be a slight favorite over Edson Barboza in their matchup. But overall, got to say that Edson Barboza, if he can be on the front foot, then he can do some damage. And if it was him in his prime, we would be going around tough matchup. That is for sure. But he's going in that slight favorite for Patricio Pitbull in this one. Now, next up, we have Dan Ige. Dan Ige, when we look at him against Patricio Pitbull, both of them, they've got power. And durability is definitely there, especially on Ige's side. And the ground game is there too. Now, Dan Ige on the ground, I mean, he's better with his offensive wrestling to get it there. Can he get Pitbull down? I highly doubt it. And when it comes to the submission-based game, the grappling-based game, I do prefer Patricio Pitbull in that. But When it comes to the striking, Dan Ige is a pretty conservative striker, and he doesn't really overextend too much when it comes to his boxing, which is good against a guy like Pitbull, because if you overextend, Pitbull is very, very good with his counter striking. So honestly, I've got to go evenly matched with this one. They are very even across the board when it comes to those disciplines. Now, Calvin Kattar, look, he's got the boxing pedigree there to compete with Pitbull, but the issue is the ground game and him being pressured. If he's pressured on the back foot, he's going to get worked, and especially on the ground as well from what we've seen. Patricio Pitbull can do him in as well. So I've got to put Patricio Pitbull as a slight favorite against those two, especially now. And just they're both Calvin Kattar and Edson Barboza. They're just on the older side. Granted, Pitbull's 37, but he's just been so much more promising in recent matchups. Now, Bryce Mitchell, striking is just not up to par. Not up to par with what Pitbull offers, and Pitbull is just more consistently offensive with the grappling. He's hard to take down, and if this stays on the feet, I mean, Bryce Mitchell is going to get worked 100%, honestly. And when it comes to the grappling, Bryce Mitchell is good with his grappling, don't get me wrong, but Pitbull offensively, from what I've seen, and especially if Bryce Mitchell is going to shoot a takedown, I tell you, Patricio Pitbull, that guy can sink in a guillotine really nicely. An arm-in guillotine, especially off a takedown attempt from the opposition, which is Bryce Mitchell's bread and butter. Yeah, I think that's probably his best matchup in the whole entire division, to be honest. I just don't see Bryce Mitchell having a lot of options in that matchup. Now, Youssef Zalal is definitely tricky. He's tricky for anyone in this division, to be honest, because he has a nice jab. He has a nice front knee up the middle because of Factory X training there. He's very, very good with that. They just drill that. So he's got good timing on his striking, and he's got good lateral movement as well. He's definitely a difficult puzzle to solve, but then when you look at Patricio and the experience that he has, Zalal on that other side has definitely not gone up against someone that is experienced as decorated as Pitbull, and I think Pitbull can give him some trouble that no other opposition has been able to do before, but in that, I've got to go evenly matched. I think that they are pretty much stalemated in that sense, because Youssef Zalal, he's coming up, but the guy is the real deal. Now, Giga Chikadze, very similar to Edson Barboza. I mean, not as dynamic with the kickboxing, which is a little bit less of an advantage for him, but he is just, he's younger. He's more explosive as well. He's just better technically than Edson Barboza overall in recent times, and I think that's really about it for the positives. I mean, the grappling, he gets outworked, and on the back foot especially, not good. We know Giga Chikadze, we saw him against Calvin Kattar, not good. Definitely Pitbull, slight favorite in that matchup for sure. Could possibly be edging to that best matchup, to be honest, but Giga does have that kickboxing pedigree on the front foot, and he is long as well, so you have to give credit there, because Patricio Pitbull has a tiny reach, 65.5 inches of reach, and he's 5'6". So yeah, he is going to be struggling a little bit naturally against those taller fighters. And that being said, Lerone Murphy, one of those taller fighters, and he is a very technical striker, not dynamic though at the same time. You want someone that is honestly very orthodox, offbeat, throws weird combinations. That's what's going to catch Patricio Pitbull out without a doubt. They will have a very close striking battle, but the grappling, I would give it more to Pitbull. I'm not saying Lerone is bad, but Lerone is kind of more so unknown in that sense. We don't really know how great his grappling is. So I'm going to have to put it in evenly matched, but he's going to be one of the tougher ones. So he's going to be at that top there. Now, moving on to Aljamain Sterling. This one's going to be pretty interesting from you guys, I reckon, to see where I've actually put him. And I think I will probably have a couple people disagreeing with me here. I'm going to put him as the slight underdog. I think that Patricio Pitbull is going to be the favorite in that matchup, because Patricio on the feet with Aljo has a really bad knack. Obviously, you look at the Sean O'Malley fight, bad knack of overextending. And Aljo relies heavily on getting the fight to the ground. Can he get the fight to the ground? I think he honestly can. He's a fantastic grappler, don't get me wrong. Good wrestler. But when it's on the ground itself, I mean, off his back, I mean, literally on top anywhere, Pitbull is seriously dangerous. And that's something that is underestimated in his game. And that's why I really like to analyze it in his Fighter Spotlight video. And that's where I think it's just a bit of a mismatch for Aljo unless he can completely stay safe within the grappling and just dominate him with the wrestling, which it's just biting off much more than he can chew, I think. I just don't see that happening. Slight favorite, though, not anywhere near that top value, but he is closer to that evenly matched, that's for sure. Now, Josh Emmett, the Nugget. I mean, both of these guys have muscle, both in the same height. Power levels are similar-ish. I mean, it's really hard to beat Josh Emmett with power, obviously. I mean, ask fucking Bryce Mitchell. But Emmett he's definitely the trickier thing with him is more one-dimensional because he's not going to be hunting those takedowns. Patricio Pitbull does have more options when it comes to the grappling, and he's a bit more technical overall with the striking, especially the counter striking, and that's where I think it is going to be more so evenly matched. It's just really with that power equalizer, I do think, for Josh Emmett. That's just with anyone, to be honest. Are you really going to say Josh Emmett against literally anyone is going to be like a massive underdog in this division? Except Ilia Topuria, of course. Let's skip that. But yeah, I'm going to put with the power equalizer for sure. And with them being the same height, I've got to put Josh Emmett in that evenly matched category. But if he didn't have the power, definitely a slight favorite to possibly even a best matchup for Pitbull because he's just much more diverse with his just arsenal overall when it comes to each individual discipline. Now, Arnold Allen. Arnold Allen is definitely a tricky matchup because he's got good kickboxing and he knows how to use his aggression very well and time his explosive combinations very well, which Pitbull does the exact same thing. Very, very similar in that sense. Ground game offensively isn't as strong as Pitbull's, but it is hard to keep Allen down. He's very, very strong, and he's hard to just take out in general. It's just a razor close fight. Honestly, like the top of evenly matched. Like that one is a very, very close fight, and honestly, getting close to leading to a tough matchup for him. Now, Brian Ortega. This is where we're looking more in that grappling dimension, of course, and both of them are extremely high level. And I would say their striking is actually quite similar as well, because they both have pretty low output when it comes to their striking. Just overall volume, it's not that high, but they do use their accuracy more so effectively when it comes to that low output. So it's very difficult to actually discern between the two of them. I'm going to put it in evenly matched, but it's not super close to the top. I would be, especially with Brian Ortega in recent times, and Pitbull, the way that he has looked. Yes, he's been submitted once and he's been taken out before, but Pitbull, honestly, like the guy coming in, he is dangerous when it comes to countering effectively, and Brian Ortega is one of those guys that really relies on durability and doesn't have the greatest strike defense. So that's where it's on the lower end of evenly matched. Now, Yair Rodriguez, the guy that he's actually fighting, this is going to be interesting because Yair Rodriguez is very similar to Pitbull to an extent, because both of these guys do have grappling off their back. I mean, Yair Rodriguez is good at cinching in triangle chokes, arm bars, and, things from his back overall. He is weaker in the grappling, but Yair Rodriguez, the Taekwondo base, that is the issue. That is really accentuating Pitbull's weakness. That is a kryptonite there, because Yair, he is completely untelegraphed most of the time when it comes to his kicks. Very, very offbeat striking style, and unless you're a very, very heavily good wrestler, it's going to be very difficult to outmatch Yair, and that's where I think it's a tough matchup for Pitbull. I really do think so. If Yair can get those striking combinations off, it's going to be very difficult. So if he can get past Yair, this is a huge make or break tell to see how far he is actually going to go in the UFC, because this is one of the hardest matchups for him to take stylistically. Now, Movsar Evloev. Granted, Movsar, the wrestling overall, I mean, taking it to the ground, there's a chance that Pitbull could definitely submit him, but Movsar we're getting to that higher caliber of just skill at the moment. Just the pure caliber of his offensive to defensive ground game, especially. Guy's never lost. I mean, he looks fantastic in transitions. Look what he did against Aljo, just looked absolutely amazing. And he isn't over aggressive when it comes to his striking and can counter effectively with his boxing as well. So it's close on the feet, but Movsar, when it comes to that wrestling, the pedigree of wrestling he has, he's tough. He's a tough matchup. Interchangeable between Yair and Movsar, but yeah, Movsar is definitely a tough one for Pitbull when it comes to that pure wrestling, especially on the defensive side. Now, Diego Lopes, this is going to be an interesting one from you guys as well to comment on this. But both of these guys are very similar when it comes to their styles because both of them have power on the feet. Both of them are very high-level grapplers. And Diego Lopes, he has a lot more speed and is better in the early doors if they do fight. I mean, just better at like first, second round. But if it gets to the third, fourth, and fifth, which Pitbull has a shit ton of experience, that's where I'm looking more so where it's more so evenly matched. Like, he's up the top. Like, Diego Lopes is obviously flying at the moment, but yeah, it's definitely a tricky mirror-based match. It's obviously the speed versus the longevity within the fight. Lopes could chin him within the first couple of rounds, but if he doesn't, more so in trouble, and Pitbull has the advantage. So you've got to square it down to that evenly matched, I do believe. Now, Alexander Volkanovski, the number one technically at the moment because the other two aren't here, but looking at Volkanovski, we're at that point where, I mean, you look at their fights overall. Volkanovski, he's just more technical overall when it comes to the footwork, the striking on the feet. He can outstrike Pitbull. I mean, he's just better in that circumstance, and he's strong as well. Very good at timing his takedowns, good wrestling, and great submission defense, great grappling defense. He is just a higher level, but he's not a nightmare matchup. He isn't, because especially Volk in this time frame now, especially if we're looking a couple years back, we could go at that nightmare, but I've got to put him in tough matchup. Probably go like this. Volkanovski, like, he's just a better fighter overall. He is just that higher echelon. I mean, he's got the striking capabilities there, wrestling and grappling, and he is also, yes, he's getting older, but he is younger than Pitbull as well. And especially those two being at the same height as well, like being very short, stocky. I mean, Volkanovski looks good when it's against fighters that are a bit smaller as well. He just looks very, very good. And I just think Volkanovski is, I mean, he is just the higher echelon. He's just the higher caliber. Now, looking at the two guys who are not in the division right now, these guys are just a bonus for you. Max Holloway. Max Holloway, this is where I honestly think that Pitbull is going to struggle the absolute most, because the boxing hand speed, the overall lateral movement, his ability to L-step, his ability to shift on the outside while landing very fast combinations with the hands, he's just so much faster, and he's ultimately more technical on the feet. Max isn't going to shoot a takedown as well, and if it stays on the feet, I mean, realistically, yeah, it's a nightmare for him. It's a nightmare matchup for him. I mean, Max Holloway does have those dynamic kicks, like the spinning back kick to the body. I mean, he's extremely dangerous at range, and that's where Pitbull is going to struggle. He's got like 4 inches of reach less than Holloway as well. Not a good matchup, and Patricio is definitely happy he is not in there anymore. And as well as that, he's happy that Ilia is not in there anymore as well, because Ilia, ultimately, well-rounded, just a killer. The momentum is ridiculously on his side at the moment. But I will say, like, he's the top of tough matchups. He's not a nightmare matchup because he's not an outside-based fighter like Max Holloway is. He is extremely tough, but he's not the worst because he's still within that range for that counter-striking from Pitbull. And I mean, we've seen Ilia get tagged before in that range, and Patricio, with his ability to like get a check overhand, check hook, I mean, he can land definitely easier than he could land on Max Holloway, I do strongly believe. But this is the tier list. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and when UFC 314 comes, I mean, it's going to be a bit of an uphill battle, I do believe, for him against Yair Rodriguez, but I mean, if he can get it done, then he is solidifying himself in the top ranks of the UFC, and being one of the most, if not the most decorated fighter in Bellator history, there's going to be a lot of hype and carry through behind him, so I'm definitely keen to see him perform. I hope you enjoyed the Fighter Spotlight tier list video, and if you haven't already seen it, I'll leave the actual Fighter Spotlight video here on the screen, and please like, comment, subscribe. It goes a long way for the channel, and I will catch you in the next one.